Hello everybody, I hope everyone has been enjoying their Siege 2021. And welcome to my talk, A Blueprint of a Game Experience, Understanding and Documenting How Players Navigate a Game. So, a little bit about me. My name is Simon Hoffes. I am an architect working under C+TC Design Studio within the hospitality industry, designing hotels. Game dev related, I have been part of this amazing online community called Home Team Game Dev since 2017, where a bunch of people all around the world, we get together and we make freeware games. And I've been able to participate and contribute to games from everything from programming to level design to world building to music composition to assets and so on and so forth. And I am also a professor at Kennesaw State University and a professor of design. If you want to know more about my work, see the quality of it, what I've been up to, please visit my portfolio online at simonhoffes.com. So let's get to it. So what is a tool? In its most basic definition, it is a device that aids in accomplishing a task. And there are various levels to these. We have the most primordial level, the most basic of them all, the fire. But we also have the next level, which is, a very specific device designed for a very specific purpose. In this case, hammer things down, a hammer. And then we have the next level, which I consider to be a more compounded, a little more complex tool with a very specific purposes. In this case, toasting bread, and so on and so forth. The levels go up until we get to the big pictures, right? Where we have skyscrapers helping us organize and more efficiently use our space. We have space travel, right? We're going back and forth now on space travel, and of course the quantum computer, where we're exponentially increasing our computational powers and capacities. But then the next question that comes up for me is, why tools? Why do we need them? And at its essence it is to enhance human capabilities. Now, these, as we have seen, do not only exist in the physical aspect, but also in the abstract realm. And this I would consider the first level, right? Where we have iconography, where we're, in ancient times, everything from the Egyptians to indigenous people, they were actually depicting, drawing concepts of animals and or objects. And we then get runes, and those runes then evolve into vocabulary that compose the myriad of languages that we have today, and those words carry a more complex concepts than the icons did. And then we have the next level, which would be these runes used differently in formulas, where instead of capturing concepts, they are depicting relationships, like physical relationships. Just in this case, this is the golden ratio formula. So how exactly are these conceptual tools enhancing our human capabilities? Well, in various ways. First, it is how they're helping us define concepts, focus on them, and handle them. But it also is helping us offload information into the world. And this is extremely helpful as we humans have very limited capabilities, and it is around the 110 kilobytes per second. That is the most information that we can handle at any given time. And by having, for example, the formula written down, we are able to now focus on analyzing it and understanding it instead of trying to remember it and memorize it. And this, of course, also helps us to document it for record, for posterity, but also to communicate it. And just to make a point, if we have this vast space of whiteness, we have nothing. But once we have the circle, ignoring the circle itself, we are now able to capture the concept of inside and outside. And that is really powerful. And that container of inside is the same word or way that words work. For example, once we have the word share, right, it is encapsulating the characteristics, purposes, typology, and all the other definitions that come to compose what we conceptualize as a chair. Once we have this word, once we have captured this concept, we're able to question it. And once we're able to question it, we are able to generate a myriad of iterations on this design all very different, but still all within the umbrella term of shared. And this is just to depict how important language is to us designers. And this brings me to the next slide, which is, if I were to present to you all of these raw data points, and I ask you, please depict to me or explain to me all the possible relationships between these numbers. You probably could do it, but it'll probably take you a few hours to figure it out. But what if I take the exact same information and I show it to you in a graphical way, via statistics and diagrams? We immediately understand it better, right? And that's because, like, the way that we compute information, we're just able to understand it, absorb it, interpret it in a way faster manner if it's done in a graphical manner rather than these raw data runes way. And this, of course, helps us to better communicate, which helps us to increase better quality of cross-examination, which ends up letting us have better designs. And this brings me to what I believe is the optimal conceptual tool to bring ideas from the conceptual world and project them into the real world. And these are the blueprints. Now, and here I'm pulling from my architectural expertise. I believe that even though we have been able in the architectural industry to develop 3D, Revit-like or 3D tools that enable us to model in real time, and where each specific element in that model has layers upon layers of accurate information of how the building is going to be built. Everything always goes back and ends up being reflected back into the blueprint. And this really shows how optimal and how important the actual concept of the blueprint is. And of course, this, I want to make clear, this is not to say that we haven't been able to do awe-inspiring architectures in the past. Of course, we have La Sagrada Familia in Spain, we have the Giza pyramids in Egypt, and we have Machu Picchu in Peru. But all of these were done, and they took way longer, with way more efforts to be able to get done than what we're doing today with modern buildings. Of course, there's a myriad of other variables that come into play, but I do believe that one of them is the way that we have developed and evolved our conceptual tools to think about and document architecture. At the bare minimum, we have a temporal cost that we're saving on, right? Like the pyramids, took decades to be able to be built. La Sagrada Familia is also decades upon decades to be able to be built. Like it's barely being finished today. And I think the game design document is the closest thing we have to a blueprint in the game design industry. And of course, there are no industry standards for these, and these are the game design document really just is looking to capture and explain four major categories of the game, right? Like the gameplay, the art, the technology, and the plan, how we're making all of this happen. But I do question if this is really the equivalent of the building's blueprint for a game. And the game design document, what it does is it takes the game and it breaks it down into its very nuanced, specific layers and components, and really does a really good job at explaining each one separately in isolation, how it's going to be built, its purposes, and all that. But there isn't really a tool within the design document or out of it that really shows us how all these very specific parts come together to make the game experience. And now, there is never going to be a substitute to playing a game, the same way that there is never going to be a substitute to experimenting a building firsthand. But just as the blueprint of a building gives us a really, really good idea of how it's going to be built and come together, I think we need that equivalent for game design. And then the same is not to say that we haven't been able to make great games with the current tools that we have. But I I cannot but question if today's games are not our past pyramids. And what would our a game look that it would be parallel to today's architecture in relation to, for example, the pyramids. So architects have two types of basic drawing tools, right? We have the blueprints and we have the perspectives. So blueprints are the tool that we use to be able to document not only the design of the building from all angles outside, but we're also able to slice up at different instances of different axes the project to really understand it inside and out. And this is really our equivalent of our anatomies drawings, where we're able to take this project and document it and specify it in a manner where there are no generalities, there are no projections of what it could be. Everything is to scale, to proportion how it should be and how it will be. And this is really powerful because if we were ever to change something very small or very big in the building, we're able to instantaneously see how that design decision, that design change affects the rest of the building from different vantage points. Now, the perspective is our attempt to project how it's going to feel to be in that building, right? So that the blueprints, the orthographics, they do not have perspective. They do not have that distortion because we're trying to be as objective as we can in our analysis of it. But in perspective, we are really trying to understand how the human perception is going to perceive this project, right? So the one-point perception, texture, shadows all come into play. And I really think that our current state of the game design document is more akin to the architect's perspective drawings rather than our blueprint. So this brings the question, how exactly or from what vantage point are we going to create or generate this, or we need this blueprint for the game for the game design industry? And I would argue it is from the player's perspective, right? They are the ones enacting, navigating, and inhabiting the game. And saying the player really means saying cognition. And our working definition for cognition is going to be the mental action and processes of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. So this is really important because it doesn't matter what type of game we're playing. It doesn't matter if it's a rudimentary playground game, just like hopscotch, or all the way through to the latest tech of VR games. All of them require rules. Now, the difference between these is how the rules are enacted or enforced. One of them, the players have to actively enact the rules. The other one, the system, the computer enacts them, enforces them. But it doesn't matter. The player needs to understand cognitively the rules to be able to navigate the game, and this requires cognition. Now, we know what we are documenting. The question still remains, how are we documenting it? And here I am proposing that we use the affordances and signifiers theory to break up and create the structure of the game experience, and then the flow state to be used as how to determine how cognition is flowing through the game. And then all of this lives within the Relational Joints Framework. This is a framework I am developing that is helping to create a blueprint for the game experience. So the first thing that we need to understand is that every time we have a goal, we interface with a design. For example, if I want to make a phone call, I have to interface with my phone. Now, that interface requires cognition to be able to understand how to handle it properly, right? So the affordances of an object are not characteristics of an object, right? They're not even the affordances of the object. They are the characteristics of the relationship between the agent, in this case me, the person, and the phone. For example, I can take this phone, make a phone call, I can pick it up, I can throw it, I can use it as to pin paper down. I can interface with the touchscreen. So every possible action that I could do, those are the affordances. Now, if we were to change me, the person, with the phone, and we instead put the phone and the dog is not able to do everything that I'm able to do with the phone. The phone is still the same, but the affordances changed, right? So the dog can put it to its ear. They can't really interface with the touch screen, but they can pick it up with their mouth, which I really can't. So depending on the relationship of the object, even though the object's the same, and the agent could change, the affordances emerge. Now, the signifiers are inherent characteristics of the object. And the signifiers are all the things that characterize how to use the affordances, right? So for example, if we have a door, and that door has a vertical grab bar, we have a psychological leaning to want to grab it and pull it, right? But if we encounter the door with a metal plate on it, we want to push it. Now, these innate psychological leanings that we have in our head as humans really help us to interpret how to interact with the world. And this is a very well known at this point concept. So, and well, the point here is that each design needs the human to be able to understand and interpret the signifiers to be able to operate the affordances of the design, right? So that point, that red dot that needs the affordances to be operated and the signifiers to be interpreted, I'm calling a relational joint. Now, the line that goes from the user to the goal that has the red line on it, the red dot, sorry, on it, I'm calling a relational pathway. Now, okay, so now that we have this very basic understanding of how to generate a relational pathway, let's go ahead and do a very basic games relational pathway. So the first relational joint that comes up is between the user and the controller. So where the user needs to really understand how to properly hold it and how to push the buttons. The second relational joint that comes up is between the controller and the avatar, where the player really needs to understand how the controller maps to the avatar, right? Do I press A to make Mario jump or B to make him run? The third relational joint is between the avatar and the environment, right? Is Mario able to go down the green pipe, or is he able to smash a brick block, etc.? And then the fourth relational joint is between the environment and the goal, right? Is that mushroom within the question mark block, or is it within the brick block? So now that we have a very basic understanding of a game, of a avatar mediated game, let's go now and try to understand how we navigate it cognitively. So, and here's where the flow state enters. So the flow theory states that if a challenge is presented to a player that is greater than their current skill sets, that person is going to feel anxious. But if the skill level is way higher than the challenge being presented, that person is going to feel bored and disappointed. So I'm positing here and within the Relational Joints framework that this balance of the flow state can be also understood from a cognitive standpoint, right? So if we're able to, or if we in the game experience require too much cognition from the player, we're creating that anxiety state. If we require too low of a cognition, we're creating that boring state. And whenever one of these balances happen at any point in the game, at any relational joint, a disruption happens to the cognitive flow, and the whole game experience gets tarnished a little. But if we require just the right amount of cognition from the player, a flow state is generated, right? Where the challenge is met by the correct level of skill level from the player. Now the flow state is created, and then the player loses sense of time, loses self of consciousness, feels engaged but not overwhelmed, within other very positive sensations and feelings. So then this brings us that now to we can actually with this relational pathway, we can also understand and navigate how we navigate. We can depict and how we navigate a game experience, right? So in this case, it's really a dynamic process, a really dynamic scenario where, it's not static. We're not ever going to be just at one relational joint specifically. It really depends on how and where and what the player is doing in the game at any given moment. For example, once the player picks up the controller for the first time, they're engaging on that first relational joint, and anything and everything cognitively required to be able to navigate up to that level in the game experience. But once they start using the controller to manipulate the avatar, they have now engaged both the first and the second relational joint, and so on and so forth, depending on what the player is doing at the game. But then this also gives us a window, a very interesting window, into how much time a player is spending at each instances, at each relational joint in the game experience, and that really gives us a window to be able to determine and manage our focus of design into very specific parts of the game experience. But then also we have a sequence of the structure where, for the game experience to be able to be navigated successfully, there has to be a specific order that is to be followed. For example, a player cannot really navigate or cognitively understand how to navigate and interact the avatar with the environment until they have understood how the user needs to interact successfully with the controller. So there really needs to be a sequence followed to permit that cognitive flow. And all of this also permits us not to only, passively understand how cognition is being distributed, but it's also given us the tools to actively distribute that cognition and design that distribution. We're also able to understand the ripple effects of actions or events or design decisions that happen at the first relational joint, how the ripple effects to the second one, the third, the fourth, and so on. And this is also creating a taxonomy of the game experience, which is more nuanced, more accurate, and it's also offering us a new set of vocabulary to be able to talk about this game experience in a more accurate fashion. Okay, up to this point, we have been using a very simplistic relational pathway model for a game, avatar-mediated game. But in reality, it looks more like this. Now, I have placed numbers for each one for nomenclature purposes, just so I know and we can more accurately talk about each one for this presentation, but they have no hierarchical purpose or order. Now, the main components of the pathway model still remain, right? We have a user, we have the control, we have the avatar, the camera, the environment, and the goal. But everything extra that's depicted is really all the relationships that emerge from them. And I do believe that this is a more accurate blueprint for a game experience. So let's walk through how all the different design instances and decisions fall in very specific instances of the game experience, or in this relational model and joints. So in relational joint number 1, which would be between the user and the controller, everything and anything having to do with the controller design and ergonomics happen here. And in relational joint number 2, between the controller and the avatar, anything that happens or any design decisions that need to be made in accordance with, how many and how fast should the buttons for this combo be pressed to be able to get the ultimate attack from Goku, are really made at this point. If we go to number 7, right, between the avatar and the goal, how is Mario interacting with the goal? What happens at that point? Number 5. Here is where the designers need to explore and set how the avatar is going to interact and navigate with the environment. Number 8, environment and goal. Is the mushroom within the question mark block or the brick block? Number 4, between controller and the camera. Here is how much control are we given the player over the camera itself. Number 3, between the camera and the avatar. Are we placing the camera over the shoulder of the avatar to create a more intense emotional attachment to the avatar itself, so the player has that attachment and that view? And number 6, between the camera and the environment. Are we giving the God view that much amount of scope, of visual scope to the player of the environment, or are we going down to first or third person view? And again, this is a really good depiction of how all the design instances and design decisions fall in very specific instances within the game experience. And of course, again, this is not to state that this is the relational pathway model or the blueprint for all games. This is really a system that helps you generate a blueprint. And of course, you can take away or add. For example, if we were to add a weapon system to this game, we would need to add then 2 relational joints. One between the avatar and the weapon, so how does the avatar pick up or interact with the weapon, but also the second relational joint would be between the weapon and the environment. So, do I have this gun that is able to shoot portals into concrete walls? So again, a very flexible system. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is how this system really also helps to give a window into what specific team member or designer, their scope of impact within the design itself. For example, a hardware designer is only going to be able to operate within that first relational joint, versus like the game designer, which has a pretty big umbrella, but then the level designer has a way smaller scope than the game designer, and so on and so forth. And so with now understanding and having a plan or an example of how to generate the blueprint of a game via the Relational Joints Framework, this really does permit us to do 2 big things. First, it's not only letting us understand what the player is experimenting, right, and better design how the player is going to experiment this game, and also let us replicate it or understand it, right, to almost like the anatomical level, where we're not talking about this monolithic concept of the game experience, the game design. We're now able to really break it down into its parts, and be able to accurately talk about it. But it's also taking away this layer of subjectivity when talking and expressing ideas about the game design, where we're not taking anything away, we're not lessening the game design itself, but we're now able to break it down and document it in a way that it's going to help us to further our understanding of the game design. And that is my talk for today. Thank you for your time. If you want to see more of my work, again, please visit my portfolio online at simonhoffis.com. And, I am more than happy and excited to hear y'all's feedback and ideas. So please either contact me personally via Discord, or if you find me in person, or just reach out, go to my portfolio on the contact page and send me an email. That goes directly to my inbox, and I am pretty actively looking at my inbox, so I'll make sure to respond back. So yes, thank you for your time, and I hope everyone keeps enjoying their Siege 2021 experience. Bye.